You see, one of the greatest confusions we face today, especially among women who want to be good, sincere, and nurturing, is the inability to distinguish between softness and weakness. And this is where the danger begins. Because when you blur that line, you end up tolerating things that should never be tolerated. You excuse behaviors that should be confronted. You shrink into silence when truth demands a voice. There's a very subtle deception in our culture today. The glorification of the soft woman, who is always accommodating, always agreeable, always available. She's praised for her patience, her silence, her willingness to forgive over and over again, even when it's breaking her spirit. But let's be honest, that isn't softness, that's erasure. And you were not created to erase yourself, just to keep the peace. Softness, in its true form, is strength under control. It's gentleness that's rooted in dignity, not desperation. The Prophet Muhammad was described as the gentlest of men, yet he was firm, clear, and unwavering when it came to principles. He knew when to extend kindness and when to draw the line. He showed us that real strength isn't in loudness or aggression, but it's also not in passive submission. It's in having a spine made of steel and a heart soft enough to carry others, without losing yourself in the process. Too many women have been conditioned to believe that being a good woman means always saying yes. Yes to mistreatment. Yes to being overlooked. Yes to being emotionally drained for the sake of keeping others happy. And often this is celebrated as strength. But that's not what strength looks like. That's what fear looks like. Fear of abandonment, fear of not being loved, fear of rocking the boat. And those fears are not from Allah, they're from the nafs and from the conditioning of a world that benefits when a woman doesn't know her worth. Let's look at this psychologically. When a woman continually overrides her boundaries, when she remains silent in the face of emotional abuse, when she avoids conflict to keep the image of a soft, quiet, agreeable woman, she trains her nervous system to tolerate dysfunction. Over time, she loses her inner compass. Her body starts to believe that safety lies in self-sacrifice, that survival means silence. And eventually, she forgets who she really is, because she's been performing a role that society gave her. This is not what Islam teaches. Allah didn't create you so you could please everyone else while displeasing yourself, and worse, displeasing Him. He created you to be whole, not half. He created you to walk the earth with purpose, not apology. He gave you the examples of Khadija, Are, of Aisha, of Asiya, women who were compassionate, yes, but never afraid to speak truth, to stand firm, and to walk away from what dishonored them. Softness is not about losing your voice. It's about knowing how to use it with wisdom. It's not about avoiding conflict. It's about choosing your battles. It's not about saying yes to everything. It's about learning when a sacred no is an act of worship. And this is where many women go wrong. They think being loving means being a doormat. They think being peaceful means avoiding every disagreement. But in doing so, they betray themselves. They betray the very soul Allah gave them to guard. One of the most dangerous outcomes of this mindset is spiritual burnout. When you're constantly giving, absorbing pain, carrying the weight of others' irresponsibility, all in the name of being soft, you will eventually collapse. Your heart, no matter how big, was not made to be a dumping ground for the world's dysfunction. Allah never asked you to destroy yourself to prove your worth. He asked you to submit to Him, not to people. So ask yourself, is your softness a form of compassion or a form of fear? Are you saying yes because you genuinely want to do that, or because you're afraid of what will happen if you say no? Are you patient in the face of injustice because of strength or because of self-doubt? These are questions every woman must wrestle with, because at some point silence stops being noble and starts being self-abandonment. And understand this, boundaries are not the opposite of softness, they are the protection of it. When you set a boundary, you're saying, I value myself enough to protect my peace, my purpose, and my proximity to Allah. That's not arrogance, That's clarity. And in a world that constantly tries to confuse, shrink, and reshape women, clarity is revolutionary. So if you're a woman who's been taught to stay quiet, to always smile, to say it's okay when it's not, it's time to wake up. Your softness should be your strength, not your sentence. Be the woman who can be gentle with others without being harsh with herself. Be the woman who can forgive, but also walk away when dignity demands it. Be the woman who is soft in heart, but solid in faith. Because softness without strength will break you. But strength, wrapped in softness, that is what will build you. And maybe, just maybe, the first step to reclaiming your power is to stop being the kind of soft that hurts you. Let's talk about emotional strength, real, lasting, inner resilience. Because a lot of women today have been taught that breaking down, falling apart, and constantly depending on others for emotional survival is somehow normal. That crying every night and calling it sensitivity is a virtue. That overthinking, overanalyzing, and overgiving are signs of being deeply compassionate. But we need to start being honest. Much of what is praised as emotional softness is actually emotional fragility. And fragility is not from strength. It's from imbalance. A woman who cannot regulate her emotions, who collapses under pressure, who lets every criticism shake her identity, is not soft. She is unanchored. And when a soul is unanchored, it gets tossed by every wave. One moment you're confident, the next you're doubting yourself. One word from someone, one look, one rejection, and suddenly your whole world feels unstable. That's not who you were meant to be. That's not how Allah created you. You were created with a qalb, a heart that was designed to bend, not break. Islam doesn't ask you to suppress your emotions, but it also doesn't allow you to be ruled by them. The Qur'an constantly speaks to the heart and the intellect. Because true balance is when your emotions are guided by wisdom, not consumed by impulse. This is what emotional fortitude means. It means being able to feel without drowning. It means facing heartbreak without losing your identity. It means being compassionate without becoming a casualty of your own kindness. But here's the reality. Emotional strength is not something that appears out of thin air. It must be cultivated. It's a discipline. And just like physical strength comes from training your body, emotional resilience comes from training your mind and soul. You have to learn how to sit with discomfort, how to respond rather than react, how to hold yourself through the storm instead of begging someone else to hold you together every time you fall apart. And this doesn't make you cold. It makes you capable. It doesn't mean you don't cry. It means your tears don't drown your direction. It means you cry before Allah, not before people who exploit your vulnerability. That's the difference between a woman who's emotionally grounded and a woman who's emotionally dependent. One finds healing through faith, the other keeps searching for someone to save her. Think about this. Every time you run from pain, you train your mind to fear discomfort. And when you fear discomfort, you become a slave to your emotions. You fear rejection, so you overplease. You fear confrontation, so you silence your truth. You fear loneliness, so you attach to people who don't value you. And all of it feels normal, because it's wrapped in the language of softness. But that's not softness. That's emotional instability dressed up in poetic language. Islam teaches you to feel deeply, but act wisely. The Prophet experienced immense sorrow. He grieved. He cried. But never once did he allow grief to turn into despair. That's the line we must learn to draw. Because when your emotions are not filtered through the lens of faith, they become dangerous. They guide your choices. They define your worth. They distort your perception of reality. You see, emotional fortitude doesn't mean you don't get hurt. It means you no longer build your identity around your pain. It means you don't keep replaying the wound, hoping someone will come and fix it for you. You take it to Allah. You process it. and then you rise. You walk forward not because it doesn't hurt, but because you know who is walking with you. And this is why dua, dhikr and salah are not just rituals. They're tools. They realign your emotional state with divine wisdom. They anchor your heart to something greater than mood swings, disappointments, or societal pressure. They remind you that your peace doesn't depend on people. It depends on your connection with the one who never fails. So when the world calls you too emotional, let it go. But when your own heart becomes a battlefield that you don't know how to manage, that's where the real work begins. Emotional strength is learning how to carry yourself through darkness, knowing that light is not found in comfort, it's found in conviction. It's time to stop glorifying fragility. You are not created to crumble every time life gets heavy. You were created to carry purpose. And purpose is not light. It's weighty. But when your strength is built on faith, that weight becomes a gift, not a burden. Stop apologizing for feeling, but also stop using feeling as an excuse to avoid growth. You are capable of deeper stillness. You are capable of choosing peace, even when pain is loud. You are capable of letting go without self-destruction. And the moment you begin to train your soul to rely on Allah rather than emotional reactions, that's the moment you become unstoppable. So ask yourself, are your emotions leading you closer to your Lord or further away from Him? Are you reacting out of old wounds or responding from a place of inner wisdom? Are you surviving or are you finally learning to live? Because there's a massive difference between a woman who feels deeply and a woman who's ruled by those feelings. Be the one who feels, who grieves, who hopes, but above all, who rises. Over and over again, with grace, with strength, with Allah. One of the most damaging beliefs a woman can hold is the idea that staying silent is safer than speaking up. That if she avoids expressing herself, if she just nods along, keeps the peace, doesn't make waves, she'll somehow be loved more, respected more, accepted more. But let me ask you, respected by who? Accepted by what? At what cost? Silence can be noble, yes, when it's rooted in wisdom. But silence can also be destructive when it comes from fear. And that's the silence too many women are living with. The silence of not saying what they truly believe. The silence of swallowing pain. The silence of watching injustice, disrespect, and mistreatment unfold in their lives. And thinking that if they just keep quiet, things will get better. That is not patience. That is not strength. That is slow self-erasure. Allah gave you a voice for a reason. And that voice is not a flaw. It's not a mistake. It is a trust, a tool, a responsibility. And when you fail to use it, you are not protecting peace. You are participating in your own oppression. We have to break this myth that a quiet woman is always a pious woman. Some of the most courageous women in Islamic history spoke. Aisha was not silent. She was intellectually fierce. She narrated more hadiths than most male. She debated scholars. She spoke truth even when it was uncomfortable. Kaula bint Labah, Araid, confronted the Prophet about the injustice of her husband's words, and Allah revealed verses in the Qur'an in her defense. These women were not quiet in the face of wrong. They didn't lower their gaze when their dignity was under attack. They raised their voices, firmly, respectfully, but fearlessly. This isn't about arrogance, it's about amanya, trust. You were given insight, intuition, conscience. And when something is wrong, your silence doesn't make it right. Too many women are conditioned to be agreeable at all costs, to choose peace over truth. But let's be clear, peace that's built on lies, on suppression, on swallowing your voice, that's not peace. That's pretense. And eventually, that kind of silence turns into resentment, bitterness, and spiritual exhaustion. You can't keep abandoning yourself and expect your soul to thrive. There's this idea that being low maintenance makes you lovable. that the less you ask for, the more you're valued. But that's false. If your needs can't be spoken, if your beliefs must be hidden, if your values must be diluted just to stay in someone's good books, then you are not being loved. You are being tolerated. He created you to stand in dignity. There's also a psychological cost to this kind of silence. When you repeatedly hold back your truth, your body starts to register that silence as safety. You convince yourself, if I speak, I'll lose them. If I set boundaries, they'll leave. If I disagree, I'll be judged. So you keep quiet. But inside, the tension builds. And the longer you suppress your voice, the more disconnected you become from your authentic self. Over time, you don't even know what you want anymore. You lose clarity. You lose direction. You lose yourself. And that is not the woman Islam calls you to be. A believing woman is not someone who hides behind fear. She faces it. She doesn't seek conflict, but she doesn't run from it either. She speaks with adab, manners, but also with heart, truth. Because silence is not always golden. Sometimes silence is complicity. Now, of course, there's wisdom in when and how you speak. Not every battle needs to be fought. Not every comment deserves a reaction. But the problem is, many women don't struggle with over-speaking. They struggle with never speaking, with always second-guessing for having a voice, always shrinking to make others comfortable. But you cannot serve Allah fully while constantly betraying yourself. You cannot embody truth while suppressing the very tool Allah gave you to declare it. And don't think this only applies to public issues or religious debates. It applies in your home, in your relationships, in your workplace. If something is hurting you, if something is unjust, if something violates your values, you must speak kindly, calmly, but clearly, because clarity is mercy and confusion is cruelty. What you allow through your silence becomes the culture of your life. If you allow disrespect, it becomes the norm. If you allow emotional neglect, it becomes your expectation. And then you teach others how to treat you, not through your words, but through your silence. So ask yourself, what is your silence protecting? And more importantly, what is it costing you? We don't need more agreeable women. We need more women of principle. Women who speak not to argue, but to uphold truth. Women who speak not to be loud, but to be clear. Women who fear Allah more than they fear being misunderstood. Your voice is not a threat. It is a sign of life. Use it for what matters. Speak for what's right. And most of all, speak in a way that your soul will testify on the day of judgment. That you stood for truth, even when your voice trembled. There's a dangerous pattern that far too many women fall into, living for the eyes of others. Measuring their worth by how liked they are, how accepted, how praised. And they call it humility, they call it love, they call it femininity. But in reality, it's a quiet form of self-abandonment. A kind of slavery not to Allah, but to the perception of people. It begins subtly. You post something meaningful, then delete it because someone might misinterpret it. But it continues at no level, because living subtly means different things to different people. It begins subtly. You post something meaningful, then delete it because someone might misinterpret it. You hold back your opinion, even when it's right, because it might upset someone. You start altering the way you speak, dress, think, even feel, not because you believe in those changes, but because someone else might not approve. And over time, this becomes your default setting. You become so used to reading the room that you stop reading your own soul. You're so busy pleasing others that you forget who you were created to please. This is not the life Allah designed for you. He didn't place you on this earth so that your self-worth could be outsourced to the approval of people. The truth is, the more you live for validation, the more you lose your voice, your values, and your vision. And the scariest part, you won't even realize it's happening. Because the world will praise you for being so easygoing, so sweet, so selfless. But inside, you are exhausted, spiritually empty, because your life is no longer driven by conviction, it's driven by fear. Detaching from validation doesn't mean you become cold or rebellious. It means you come home to yourself. It means you stop basing your self-worth on being accepted and start basing it on being aligned with your values, your principles, and above all, when your worth is tied to people, it rises and falls with their mood. But when your worth is rooted in your Creator, it becomes unshakable. You were never meant to please everyone. Even the Prophet, despite his perfect character, his mercy, his patience, was rejected, insulted, opposed. And Allah reminds him in the Qur'an, you are not responsible for their guidance, but Allah guides whom He wills. That reminder wasn't just for him, it's for us too. You are not responsible for being understood by everyone. You are not responsible for being liked by everyone. Your job is to walk in truth, to carry yourself with sincerity, to strive for Allah's pleasure, not public approval. What you need to realize is that people's opinions are incredibly fickle. Today you're praised, tomorrow you're criticized for the exact same action. One moment they applaud your strength, the next they mock your assertiveness. One moment they admire your faith, the next they call you extreme. If you live your life trying to mold yourself into what pleases them, you will be endlessly shape-shifting, never grounded, never whole. And here's something deeper. When you constantly seek validation, you stop trusting yourself. Every decision becomes anxiety. You question every move. Will they like it? Will they judge me? Will they talk about me? That's not peace. That's fear disguised as people-pleasing. And fear is a terrible master because it never leaves you alone. It's always demanding more compromises, more self-sacrifice, more silence. The Quran tells us that the believer fears no one but Allah. That doesn't mean you become arrogant. It means you become free. Free from the chains of being defined by others, free from editing yourself to fit someone else's comfort zone, free from performing roles you never believed in just to be seen as enough. And make no mistake, validation is addictive. The more you get it, the more you need it. And eventually, you become emotionally dependent on external affirmation. If people like you, you feel worthy. If they ignore you, you spiral. That's not spiritual health, that's emotional captivity. And you were not created for that. You were created for submission, not to people's expectations, but to your Lord's guidance. Now ask yourself honestly, when you wake up in the morning, whose approval are you dressing for? When you speak, whose acceptance are you seeking? When you make choices, whose voice echoes in your mind? If it's not Allah's, then you are living someone else's life. You are wearing someone else's values. And that kind of life, no matter how polished it looks on the outside, will always feel hollow on the inside. Because here's the truth, when you constantly seek to be liked, you'll end up betraying your own soul. But when you live with purpose, you may not be liked by everyone, but you'll be respected by the right people. And more importantly, you'll be at peace with yourself and at peace with your Lord. So it's time to stop asking, do they like me? And start asking, does Allah love me? It's time to stop performing and start living. To stop seeking permission to be who you already are. Because the most powerful version of you is the one who stops needing to be liked and starts daring to be real.